Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Randall. And welcome, everyone, to the IAB Digital Audio Day. We're very happy that you're here. And we're also very happy that today's weather is today's weather and tomorrow's weather is not today's weather. I'm Jennifer Lane, and I'm the audio industry lead at the IAB. And on behalf of the entire audio committee at IAB, I'd like to welcome you. I'd also like to say thank you to our sponsors, Authentic, Spotify, Triton Digital, Pandora, iHeartMedia, and of course WNYC, who has graciously offered to host us here in this really nice space today. I'd also like to thank the group of audio committee members who worked very hard on today's program. I think you're going to find it very informative, and without further delay, I'd like to get right to it. Our next presenter is an expert on the brain. In particular, she studies the impact that audio and music have on the brain. Audio is an especially powerful tool for eliciting some of our strongest emotions and memories. It has the power to startle us and to evoke physical sensations, like the goosebumps you get when you hear a song that you love, or the wince you make when you hear nails on a chalkboard. Here to tell us about her research on the impact that audio and music in particular can have on neural systems, a cognitive neuroscientist at New York University, Dr. Amy Belfi.
Okay, hi. Can you all hear me? Is this good? Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for the introduction, and thanks for having me here. So I'm Amy. I'm a neuroscientist, psychologist. I work at NYU, and my research is all about music and the brain. So why does a song have the ability to evoke the feeling of chills down our spine or remind us of a memory that we've long forgotten from our past? Those are some of the questions that I've tried to answer through my research. So I've titled my talk The Power of Audio. I've been working with Spotify on this new initiative they've been doing, trying to really answer this question of why is audio so powerful? And I think one of the best ways to illustrate the power of audio is to give you an example. So I'm going to play just a really brief video that I think perfectly kind of encapsulates the power of audio. Here we go.
I have one resident that barely opened her eyes. She didn't respond. As much as I tried, I knew her for 2 years. No matter what I tried, massage wouldn't work, nothing worked. But when we got introduced to the iPods and the family told me the things that she liked, it was amazing once we put the iPod on her. She started shaking her feet. She started moving her head. Her son was just amazed. Okay, can we stop? Because now I'm getting all I'm seeing her all over again.
Hi, Papa. Hi, Papa.
Huh?
How you doing?
I'm all right. I'm fine.
Who am I?
I don't know. Wait a minute. I don't know.
Okay, it's Cherry. How long has he been in the nursing home? Approximately 10 years. He was having seizures, and my mother couldn't handle him at home. Of course, it affected me greatly because he was always, fun-loving, singing, every occasion he would come out with a song, no matter where he was.
Okay, just to narrate this a bit. So this video comes from a documentary where they're illustrating how they bring iPods into nursing homes and give them to the residents. And so they give you this example of Henry here, who when we first see him in the nursing home, he's kind of just sitting there kind of quietly looking into himself. And I'm going to jump ahead into the video, into the part where they put the iPod on him so you can kind of see how the audio that he's listening to ends up transforming.
Yes, sir.
I found your music. You want your music now?
What's up to you? Okay.
Let's try your music, okay? And then you tell me if it's too loud or not.
Then he is given an iPod containing, we know, his favorite music. immediately he lights up. His face assumes expression, his eyes open wide. He starts to sing and to rock and to move his arms, and he's being animated by the music.
And he used to always sit on the unit with his head like this.
All right, so I think that's just a perfect way to illustrate how even in patients and individuals with very severe neurological disorders, hearing music can kind of reawaken them, as Oliver Sacks mentions. It can bring them back to the periods of their life that they have kind of forgotten about due to their illness. So that, I think, is a really great way to show how audio can be extremely powerful, even in cases where individuals no longer really have a sense of themselves. So that is a way to show how audio can be influential in individuals with neurological disorders. But as we know from just going through our daily lives, audio is very powerful for us too. So now I'm going to give an example from how audio seems to be powerful in my life. So the other day I was listening to the radio and I heard this song come on. Do it, do it, do it, do it, do it, do it, do it now. Say it, say it, say it, say it, say it, say it, say it now. Okay, so as soon as that song comes on, several things happen in my mind cognitively. So the first thing is it takes me back immediately to a memory from my life. It reminds me of when I was at the Pitchfork Music Festival in Chicago and I was seeing the band Hot Chip, who is the band that sings that song. Another thing that it makes me feel is it just makes me feel good. I hear that, I'm like, oh, this is a great song. It kind of gives me this feeling of pleasure and joy and just a general feeling of happiness. So these are two of many examples of different types of cognitive processes that music tends to evoke in listeners. And I'm going to put a couple of labels on these. So the first is an example of memory. So when we hear a song, it triggers a memory of an event from our lives. And the second is an example of emotion. When we hear a song, it can make us feel really great, like this song made me feel, or sometimes it could even move us to tears. So today I'm going to just briefly go over two different research tracks that I've been looking at to investigate how music is associated with memory and how music is associated with emotion. So I'm going to start with the memory example. As I said, when I hear this song, it reminds me of being at the Pitchfork Music Festival. I remember seeing Hot Chip, and I was trying to rush my way to the very front in front of the stage, and I could feel all these kind of sweaty people around me. It was like a hot summer day, and just feeling really excited and happy and kind of overjoyed to be there seeing this band I really liked. So that's a good example of how music evokes autobiographical memories. And when I say autobiographical, what I mean are memories that are about events that you've experienced in your life. And this is a pretty common experience. So most people can recall a time when they heard a song and it reminded them of something in their life. It's so common, in fact, that I got this email from Spotify, I think like 3 years ago. It's been a while now, where they wanted their users to send in to them the names of the songs that they associate with memories from their lives. And I was like, this is so perfect. This is exactly what my research is about. And what really caught my eye was this first line here. So this says, nothing triggers a memory quite like a song. And I thought that really nicely encapsulated the idea that we tend to hold pretty near to our hearts that not only is music a good cue for memories, but that it's better than any other cue. So nothing triggers a memory quite like a song. But no offense to Spotify, we don't actually know if that's true. So no one has really done the research to see whether or not music is any better of a cue than any other type of memory cue. So that's what I wanted to set out to answer with my research. So I was wondering, are memories evoked by music better memories than memories evoked by other cues? And when I say better, I'm interested in looking at the vividness of a memory. So a memory that's a richer, better, fuller memory will have lots more vivid details about the memory itself. So I designed an experiment to try and answer this question. So what I did is I had people come into the lab and they heard 30 different songs. And these songs were all popular music that was taken from the Billboard charts. And each person heard songs that were picked specifically for them based on their age. So you would come into the lab and you would hear songs that were popular when you were between the ages of 15 and 30 years old. I picked this age range for a couple of reasons. One, we know that this is the period of life when people tend to be developing their musical tastes. So I wanted the songs to be familiar. And also, this is a period of life known as the reminiscence bump. So if you take an average middle-aged adult and you ask them, tell me some memories from your life, they're more likely than not to pick memories from this age range, like the late adolescence, early adulthood. So I wanted to pick songs that they would be associated with memories. So I'll give you a few examples. If someone came in who was in their 30s, they might hear this. All right, someone who's in their 40s might hear this. Or or someone who's in their 50s might hear this. All right, so these are all pop songs. They're highly familiar, and my hope was that they would be highly associated with memories. But then the critical question is to compare the memories that people have in response to music to the memories in response to some other cue. And there are almost infinite number of comparisons that I could have chose. But I picked pictures of famous faces for a few reasons. So people would come in and they would hear, pop songs from like the 2000s, and I wanted to be able to match the other stimulus to the same years. So famous people have, a period of time when they were most famous. So if you came in and you heard Lady Gaga songs, you might also see a picture of George W. Bush. Another thing is that faces are also unique entities. So that's something we call semantically unique, which is a fancy way of saying that they have a proper name. So I didn't want to compare a song to like a picture of a chair or, something that's not a specific item. And also these faces are super familiar. So again, in the same reason for picking the Billboard songs, I wanted people to have a lot of associations with these items. So they would come in and they would hear the songs, they would see the faces. After each one, I would ask them, did this evoke a memory in you? And if it did, they would just describe the memory to me in as much detail as they wanted, and I would audio record this entire session. So I had 30 healthy adults do this experiment. They were, middle-aged, healthy adults with no neurological issues. So I wanted to answer, are the music-evoked memories more vivid than the memories evoked by the faces? But what I had to do is define, what do I mean by vividness, right? So I have this great audio description of people telling me about their memories, but I need to quantify it to be able to compare it between the two conditions, the music and the faces. So what I did is I took these audio recordings and I used this coding scheme based on the content of the details in the memory. So the memory I told you about being at Pitchfork and seeing Hot Chip had lots of pieces of information. And what I would do is I would break it down each piece and say, is this an internal or an external detail? So by internal details, I mean details that pertain to the actual memory, like the event, time, place, perceptions, or emotions. So in my case, it would be Pitchfork is the event, the time was in the summer, the place is Chicago, perceptions were things like feeling all of these sweaty bodies around me, and emotions were feeling excited. External details don't pertain to the central memory. So these are other events or semantic statements. So when I said Hot Chip are the people who sing that song, that's just a fact, it's a semantic statement. It doesn't have to do with the actual memory itself. So here's an example of a memory. It's someone talking about this summer. They're dating a guy for 3.5 years. What you do is you take this memory and then you just categorize the details. So here you can see the first detail is this summer, that's about time. So you tally up, those are all of the internal details highlighted in red and the external details I've highlighted in blue, and then you just add them up and calculate a ratio. So the ratio of the number of internal divided by the total number of details is how you quantify the vividness of a memory. So you can go home and do this yourself if you'd like. So the higher that ratio is, the better or more vivid the memories are. So I was expecting that the memories evoked by music would be more vivid as quantified by this ratio than the memories evoked by the faces. So what I found is that was the case. So plotted here on the x-axis, the dark gray is music, the light gray is the face-evoked memories, and then that ratio is on the y-axis. So you can see that the music-evoked memories, about 60% of the details were related to the actual memory, whereas the face-evoked memories, only about 30% of the details were related to the memory. So I'll give a couple examples. This is a good example of a music-evoked memory. So this person said, I saw him in concert in Cedar Falls, and it was so cold that night there was snow on the roof of the dome, and the heat inside caused the snow to melt, and it rained inside the auditorium dome or whatever. And I just remembered that I loved it, and it was great. Someone gave me the tickets, and I remember Mick Jagger coming out on the walkway over the crowd and just yelling. I liked it. So I've highlighted here some of these internal details about feeling cold or feeling hot. Those are the specific vivid details in red. And here's a face-evoked memory. So this person said, seeing Dennis Rodman, I love basketball. He played basketball. He played for the Bulls, which I really enjoyed watching the Bulls, and he was part of 3 championships with them. So I have pretty fond memories of that time. Before that, he played for the Pistons, and I hated his guts, and I thought he was horrible. But it just reminds me of, when I was younger and watching basketball, and it was a really good time to watch basketball when the Bulls were actually a good team. So I've highlighted here some of these more semantic or external details in blue. So you can see, even though I told people to tell me about autobiographical memories, in the music situation, this person was able to identify that Mick Jagger was the singer, but didn't tell me information about Mick Jagger. She told me information about her experience. Whereas in the face-evoked memory, okay, they identify that it's Dennis Rodman, but instead of telling me about their experience watching Dennis Rodman, they told me more facts about him. So what I've concluded from this is if I were to hear a Hot Chip song, I might tell you a lot about the concert that I went to, whereas if you show me a picture of the lead singer of Hot Chip, I might not tell you as many vivid details about the memory, but more facts about the band. So now I'm thinking, why might audio have an advantage over visuals? Why would the memories evoked by music be more vivid or be more episodic than the memories evoked by the faces? And I think one explanation for this is the idea of context-dependent memory. So this is the idea that memories are encoded along with the context in which you experience them. And this was based on a really kind of clever and crazy study that was done in the 70s, where they took a bunch of participants and they would either put them literally underwater in a scuba suit or just on land and give them a list of words and say, okay, memorize this list of words, like cat, dog, chair, whatever. Then they would wait a day, and the people would come back, and they would either go back underwater or on land. So they took the underwater people who memorized, they put half of them on land and half underwater. And what they found was that they would ask them, okay, now remember the words that I had you memorize yesterday. If you were asked to memorize the list underwater and recall the list underwater, you remembered way more than if you had to memorize underwater and recall on land. So this led the researchers to say, oh, well, so the context is really important. You might have heard this, when people suggest in college, like you should study in the same room in which you'll take the test, or you study in silence because you take the test in silence. It's the idea that memories become encoded with the situation in which you're encoding them in. So audio, I think, has an advantage because it's always with us. As we've already heard today, people are walking around on the streets, sitting in the park, exercising, constantly listening to audio. So it becomes kind of the soundtrack of our lives, and it really gets encoded deeply as part of the context in which we live. So then when we hear it later, it triggers all of those memories of events that we were doing things while we were listening to it in the background. So like if I'm sitting on my computer, I can see this ad, I can very easily ignore an ad visually. So when we are looking at things, we really can only focus on one thing at a time, whatever we're focusing on. But with audio, if I'm listening to something in the background, let's just say, I might hear this. So there was a period of my life where I was very obsessed with McDonald's. That was the first example that I thought of. But, if I'm listening to something, I hear that, even if, it's on the TV in the other room, I conjure up this visual in my head. It's paired, it's associated, it's kind of part of that context. I don't even really need the visual anymore because the audio is powerful enough to trigger that association. So I think one of the reasons that audio is so powerful is that it's really always there. It can be on in the background. We don't even need to actively attend to it. It just becomes part of this context. And then because of that, it's better associated with memory. So when you hear the audio, you think of the association to it, whether it's being at a concert or whether it's the Golden Arches of McDonald's, you make that kind of immediate association. So now I'll move a little bit to talk about why I think audio is so emotionally powerful. And we know that emotional impact is one of the most common reasons why people listen to music. So when people are asked in studies, why do you listen to music? What purpose does it serve in your life? A lot of people say, I listen to it to feel good, or I listen to it when I'm kind of down in the dumps. And I think it's a very emotionally powerful type of stimulus. And one way I like to illustrate that is by playing just a short clip from a film without the music in it. Okay, so you get the point. It's really weird without the music. So normally when you watch this, it's like this really uplifting, he did it, powerful moment. But without the music, it's just bizarre, and you maybe feel emotions because it feels awkward, but you don't feel the emotions that you're supposed to feel. So music is extremely emotionally powerful. But some of the research that I've looked into is people who don't like music. So not everyone likes music. There's this thing called musical anhedonia, which means that these are people who do not like music at all. So what I've illustrated up here is pictures of the brains of 3 different people. And the brain is 3D, so to illustrate it, you have to kind of slice it in different ways. But these are just different slices of the brain in 3 people, and I've highlighted here in red places where they have brain damage. So all of these 3 individuals had strokes, and after they had a stroke, each of them said, I actually hate music now. I don't like music. I used to like it, and now, after my brain damage, I don't get anything out of it. So this is called musical anhedonia. And I've done some work on this myself. I wanted to say, okay, there's only 3 people that have been identified so far. How common is this? So I studied a group of around 80 patients who had brain damage from strokes or trauma or neurological disorders, and I did a series of questionnaires and tests to see who I could identify with musical anhedonia. So I really only found 1 out of all 80 people, and this is an image of this person's brain here and the area of damage there. And she said, I would rather listen to nothing than music anymore. I don't get any feeling from the music I had before. So I think this is a perfect case of someone who had musical anhedonia. But what actually, usually when you do an experiment, you want to find something. So I tested 80 people, and I only found 1 person who had musical anhedonia. It was just slightly disappointing, because like, I wanted to find the answer, like what parts of the brain are associated with musical anhedonia. But then I thought, this is actually an interesting thing in and of itself, that it's so rare to find someone, even people who have major strokes or Alzheimer's disease, it's very rare to find someone who says, I don't like music anymore. And I think this speaks to what we saw earlier with Henry, that even if you have significant damage to the brain, you can still get enjoyment and kind of feel the power of audio. So musical anhedonia doesn't just exist in patients with brain damage. There also is a small portion of a healthy population who just doesn't get music. I have a friend who I can think of who just doesn't like music, doesn't listen to it, and really doesn't get anything out of it. And research has found that about 3 to 5% of the general population has this congenital musical anhedonia. So it's not due to any brain damage, it's just that's the way they are. And I was actually on Los Angeles NPR talking about this one time, which was really interesting to me, because there are a lot of people who called in and they would say, I have this, and that's why I listen to NPR, because I like to listen to people talking. I don't like music. So to me, I thought that was like, oh, that's cool. So even if they don't like music, they still need some kind of audio in their lives. You know, they don't want to sit in silence. They like to listen to podcasts or to talk radio. So it's not just music that is kind of a necessary type of stimulus, but it's audio generally. And so audio of all kinds, it's whether music or voices, can conjure up really strong emotions in us. So this is an idea called prosody. So prosody is the use of pitch, loudness, tempo, or rhythm in speech or music to convey meaning. So the people who have musical anhedonia might not get the prosody of music, but maybe they get it of speech. So here's just an example of how speech prosody can affect our emotional responses.
B-movie? B-movie? Ugh. B-movie. B-movie. B-movie.
Okay, so that goes on for a really long time. There's a lot of emotions there. But I like to use that as an example to convey how flexible audio is, that it can really, even if you're saying the same words, you can use this kind of vocal prosody to change the emotional impact that it has on the listener. So kind of from the emotion side of things, I like to say that audio is powerful because it's flexible. So it can really manipulate our emotions in lots of different ways, depending on how you might want to manipulate the emotions of a listener. And it's meaningful. So people really find joy in listening. So to sum up, I like to say that audio is a really critical, ubiquitous, essential part of the human experience. And the power of audio can be harnessed in several ways. So for one, we know that listening to music evokes this sense of nostalgia, good feelings, and memories in the listener, and that when people hear audio as part of their everyday context, it's a good cue for triggering memories and associations. Lastly, we know that audio is powerful and moves us emotionally, whether it's music or whether it's voice. People need to have some kind of audio in their lives. So with that, I'll say thank you. I'd love to take questions by email later, or later today. I'll be sticking around, and thanks for having me.